First, I wanted to thank you both for joining us today. It's a great privilege and an honor to have you both take the time out of your day to have this conversation. I think it's real important, and I really believe that the viewers are going to find it helpful as well. So what we have Vince. Vince is one of our recommended therapists. He's been with us for a long time. It's, again, a great honor to work with you as a team member in the work that we do. As you know, we've all struggled with anxiety disorder, and we're passionate about helping others because we know how bad it can be. And then we have Seth. Seth, it's such an honor to have you here too, and your willingness to have this conversation to help so many other people. So it's great I'm looking forward to hearing your story. So if you want to just jump right in, go right ahead. And as I mentioned in our preamble here, that I have construction beside us, so I'm going to mute my mic. And so I'll let you guys chat, and I'll pipe in when I can, okay?
Sure, sounds good. Well, yeah, I thank you for the opportunity. I've been looking forward to this for a while. To be honest with you, when I first started, I thought, I've heard a lot of other testimonies, and they were always, well, I didn't think I'd be at this point, and I thought the same thing early on, but I never lost heart. And then once I connected with Vince, it was just a matter of time, both physically and then emotionally and physically, just getting to that point where your body is actually stabilizing, and your rationality and everything begins to come back into play, and you realize, you kind of remove yourself from the quote unquote temporary disorder, and you realize how much of this is totally learned and how it can be unlearned. So that's the goal today, is just to kind of talk about those behaviors that I learned as a kid, and then how Vince and the Lord led me through it. I mean, it was a combination of the Lord bringing Vince into my life. I'm 100% believe that, and will never change that. He used Vince to get to the core of these issues. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And so I'm just looking forward to this opportunity.
And Seth, I just want to say that, it's taken you, we've been working together since January 2021. And you put a lot of effort and perseverance into just your recovery process. Maybe a good place to start is just asking you what made you come to that point to say, I can't do this on my own. I need some help. Back before in 2020, give me a little bit of history of what when you came to that point of wanting to seek out some help.
Sure. Well, when I look back on everything after our conversations and everything, growing up, I was an anxious child. I love my parents, and I want to make sure I put a disclaimer on this. I wouldn't change my parents for the world. God gave them to me for a reason, but my upbringing was not the best. And there was a lot of just physical and emotional abuse that went on. And so I was always on guard. And, now that, so many years have passed by, and I realize now I was on guard a lot. I did a lot of coping mechanisms to get me through it. So a lot of scenarios and things that I learned to grow up, threats and things, I always found ways of coping and having to push forward. And the one that we always talk about, Vince, was, I played soccer a lot growing up, and that was my big coping mechanism. That was my outlet. But as I got older, things started to stabilize a little bit more, but there was still that uncertainty factor that was always there. And I had around the time of my high school graduation, the proverbial, floor was pulled out from me. Scholarships fell apart, soccer scholarships, relationship with this girl that I dated, parents fall out again. A lot of things just dropped out on me from that time frame. And so the threat level just went astronomically high. And so that's when I first experienced my first bout with, the anxiety disorder. And so I didn't know anything about it. I'd read about some things on the topic, but had never really dove into the behavior aspect. Everything was always, well, you can get over this. You just got to toughen up, move on with your life, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, move on. And I did that. I moved to another state. I'm originally from Ohio, moved to Indiana, and through a progression of time, it went away. And that was probably the hyperstimulation aspect that went away. But the level 2, the underlying factors, I didn't address. They were still very present. And so a lot of things changed in my life. I got married. Things were really going well. And then through a series of things that we had found out with my wife and some health issues and miscarriages and things like that, the anxiety started to rear its ugly head again. And so at that point, I had seen my physician, my GP, and he said, well, and this is no fault of his. Again, Jim, you would know that doctors are trained to do these type of things. But the first thing he said, well, you've got a chemical imbalance. We need to wake up this part of your brain. We need to wake it up. So in about 2005, 2006, he started me on citalopram, which, everyone listens to their doctors. They want the best. Okay, well, there must be something wrong with me. So this is just how it is. This explains my upbringing. This explains why, at times I can be anxious and overly cautious about things. So I was on that, a small dose. I started off on 10 milligrams, and then it went up to 20 over time. And things started to stabilize and did those type of things. And as life went on, we just pressed forward until the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. I'd had some work issues that were going on. Jim, just to give you a little background, I'm a school teacher. I'm a high school teacher at a Christian school that has plenty of its flaws. Just understand that just because it's Christian doesn't mean that it's 100% solid. But some things were starting to happen at school, and I got to a point where I said, I don't need this medication. It's more of a crutch. And when I tell the next part, I want to make sure the viewers understand you can never go cold turkey from any type of psychotropic medication ever. I thought I was being smart and getting off of it and dealing with these things. But I went cold turkey on it, and that's when my nervous system went into chaos mode, is what I call it. It just went absolutely chaotic. So about January, February, I'd gone cold turkey, and that's when the hyper stimulation kicked in big time, and my world just fell apart from there.
Did you exude a lot of symptoms, and how did they make you feel, Seth? Symptomatic.
The symptoms came on automatically within a matter of a couple of days. I started developing stomach issues, stomach distress. I was very restless. When I was on the medication, I had restless leg syndrome, which my mom and my older brother had as well, but they weren't on medication. But now that I know that it's your body, it's overstressed. But that increased. I started developing a lot of symptoms, headaches, backaches. The biggest one for me, the racing heart kicked in, and then the stuck thoughts, the intrusive thoughts. I'd had some conversations at school with a couple of my colleagues that had said some things that, my prefrontal cortex was not functioning well when I went off the medication. So my rationality, my reason thinking wasn't working well. And had I known, in hindsight, had I known, just give it time, don't overreact, just let your body adjust. I still would have had the issues, but it would have been a little bit lighter. But I had some conversations that were just detrimental from my philosophy, the way I look at things in life. And then all of a sudden I started, the uncertainty thing. Am I the problem? Am I missing things? Am I not understanding things? Once that went in, then the hyperstimulation just went to max. It went to the highest level that there is. And as you guys know, when you're at that level, it's not healthy. I mean, the depression set in, muscle tremors kicked in, racing hearts, earworms, stomach GI issues, headaches, backaches, tiredness. I couldn't sleep. And that's the worst thing. Once that cortisol level starts getting up there high, you got to get your rest, but your body can't relax. And so I had muscle tremors in my right calf for about 6 months. One day I just stood up, and this is what's crazy. This all started going on during COVID. And so the whole world's locked down and everything. And I kind of laughed at the COVID because I'm like, and this is not to make light of it, but I'm like, okay, that doesn't scare me whatsoever. What is going on with my body right now? Like, I understand there's a pandemic going on, but COVID did not scare me whatsoever. It was everything else that I was doing. And that's the main thing is that it was my perception of everything, but I wasn't thinking clearly. So my symptoms, I had a lot of them that are on the Anxiety Center webpage. I had a lot of them, but the biggest one were the racing heart, the stomach issues, and then the stuck thoughts.
And so when you came into like sort of 2020 and 21, what made you want to start to sort of seek outside help in therapy at that point? Okay,
so as 2020 went on, I had connected with a therapist who not all therapists are the same. I mean, they're trained differently. And for a lot of them, they don't, I just want to make sure I put on there the Anxiety Center therapist. Vince, you know exactly what I'm talking about here because you went through it. Therapists, out there, they mean well, but they're not all the same. And so I went to see one and God bless him, but he didn't have a clue. He was just saying, well, this is what's going on. Do this or do that. One time he started saying, well, your alpha and your gamma rays in your brain are off. So he hooked me up to this device and said, well, I'm going to go ahead and send some stuff through you, and this should balance it out. It didn't do anything. And of course, you buy into it, you believe it. But after about 2 months, I said, this isn't going anywhere. I'm not getting any better. It's actually getting worse. And so I had to go back to work. That fall, my school actually went back to work. We didn't do anything, virtual. So I had to go back to work with my hyperstimulation at Sky High. And I kept constantly praying to the Lord. I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. Was I being punished? I was just very lost at the time. And I told him, I said, look, you're going to have to lead me out of this. I can't do this. You're going to have to put the right program or place an individual in my life to help me through this because I can't do this anymore. This is a problem. And one thing that I'm glad for the way that God made me is that I persevere. And it is a matter of, determination and whatnot, but I just persevered. And so I prayed and I asked the Lord for that guidance. And it was about a couple of nights later that I happened to come home from work and sat down and tried to calm myself down that I was doing Google search or web search and put in, one of my symptoms in there. And I kid you not, the Anxiety Center popped up on there and I clicked on it and started reading through it and said, wait a minute, this is different. And read through some more. And then I started reading Jim's testimony. And then I stopped reading the testimony and said, okay, that's how I was when I graduated high school. It was very similar to his, where everything's going well. You knew you're a worrier, but all of a sudden things just dropped out like his did, and everything changed. So after I did that, I started looking at the therapists and started reading some of their issues that they had. And I said, okay, this is all starting to line up here. So I instantly subscribed. I told my wife about it, who there's another testimony there of her patience and just the grace that God gave me by allowing me to marry my wife. I could spend another hour talking about that, but I told her about it and I said, I think I understand what's going on with me. So I subscribed and instantly became a member and started reading through it, and everything started clicking. And I actually had sent in a question, Jim, early on in the fall of 2020, that you had answered and put on the main page, which I thought, hey, the founder just answered a question like somebody's hearing me, because when you're in the midst of this, people just don't understand what you're going through biologically. And so when that got answered, I started to really go, okay, something's moving forward here. And that fall going into Christmas, at my job, we have a track in the gym, and I would walk every day. I started reading, saying, okay, let's burn off some of this cortisol. So let's get up and walk and get moving. And so I started walking laboriously in the mornings, in addition to doing my devotions. And I'd come to a point where I said, Lord, look, I need therapy. I need a real therapist, someone who knows this. You're going to have to provide the funding for this. You're going to have to provide the right person. It's in your hands. I don't want this control anymore. I can't take it. And sure enough, that Christmas, I'd been given a gift out of nowhere and said, okay, I get it. I see what you're doing, Lord. And then I went onto the webpage, Anxiety Center, and saw your info come up then, started reading it. And I said, this is the guy. This is it. So I prayed about it. And I remember I was in Texas visiting my brother at the time, and I sent a email request for therapy through you. And it wasn't even 15 minutes later, you had called and left a message on my cell phone. And I knew right then and there, I got to get to work on this. And that's where I'm at.
So you took a big step, and just a big step, if you want to call it faith, and to say, you know what, I need some help. And we started digging, didn't we? We started sort of digging up around the tree a little bit, and then getting in down into the roots and trying to find that rotten root. See, here I go with a metaphor again. And Jim, he's well aware of my metaphors and lots of them too. And you remember that big assessment we did? And we went through the questions, and we tried to look at the underlying factors. Mm-hmm. How insightful was that when you sort of started to understand? And you know, I can mention those, but I think maybe it's more of a testimony for you to mention some of those underlying factors that really had sort of an epiphany of what was really going on underneath these anxiety symptoms and some long-term hyperstimulation. Do you want to sort of comment on some of those underlying factors?
Sure, and you can add to it because there were so many of them there. As we dug through them, the perfectionism was number one on my list. Vince used to say, "You've got this measuring stick, Seth, that you measure everything up to." And I remember him saying, you got to get rid of that. You got to snap it and get rid of it. But I kept measuring. Even my, between sessions, I kept saying, well, I'm feeling like this. Shouldn't I be at this point? There was always, I kept going up and down on this measuring stick. So many of the underlying factors. And like I said, a lot of this, I learned these because my parents were worrywarts. And there was just a lot of trauma in my background from a lot of situations that led to the perfectionism. I have to have things a certain way. Uncertainty was there. The people pleasing was there. This idea that I have to be good at all times. One of the big ones is that I liked the predictability of everything. Everything had to I had to know where everything was and know how to deal with everything. Just in case something were to come up, I knew how to deal with it. And, that was a classic case of uncertainty. Like the perfectionism and the people pleasing, the rejection and abandonment were two big ones, especially the rejection, Vince, that I think that was the one that hurt the most, that rotten core, pulling that one out because I just had experienced so much of it in my life and was currently in the midst of experiencing it even more. But, the one thing you had always said to me is like, you can be rejected, but you're not a reject. And when you said that to me, that just resonated more than I'd ever heard anybody say to me before. I mean, to know that, people are going to reject you. Jesus was rejected. He never once denied who he was as God. And so when you said that to me, that really just hit. That's when I noticed the roots starting to come undone in me. I was starting to pull it out, when I would teach at school, I would teach psychology. And one of the things I would bring these things into the classroom with my students, these type of things. I always looked at myself, my situations as like a dandelion. And a lot of time when dandelions grow in your yard, you rip the top part out and you think you got it. And what you have to do is you have to pull at the complete root to get the whole thing out in order for it to go away. And that's what you started to do in my life, Vince, through all of these underlying factors. I had a bunch of dandelions in there and that I, for years, had just been mowing over the top. Oh, they're gone. And then they would come back. And what would I do? Mow over them again, right? Until fall would come, and guess what? They would go away. But spring comes, they reemerge. And so you finally said, no, we got to dig these out. And we did. And it took a long time, but it was so vital going through that pain, pulling those things out. But the only way you can get to that, that complete sense of release is pulling out the whole root.
And how about changing your behaviors? We talked a lot about that. I gave an analogy, sort of a coat I bought back in the Maritimes in the east coast of Canada, and I brought it back. And I didn't want to wear it for a long time because I didn't believe it was a $450 down-filled coat. And so my wife said, "Are you going to throw away your old coat?" And I said, "No, I'm not convinced that this is a warm coat, even though I got it for $80. I'm a good Scotsman. I like a good deal." And then I explained that analogy. I came back and it was about minus 38 on one of these hills up here in Southwest Calgary. And I put that coat on with my baklava because I didn't want to get frostbitten. And then I went, this is the most amazing coat ever. And you couldn't get that coat off of me after that. Like it was just like everywhere I went, I just dry cleaned it. It's like eight years old now. And so I had to wear a new behavior, and that took time. We have to wear these new behaviors, and it took time, and it takes time, and it takes time. And the belief has to come with it. Did you find that was a struggle for you, or was it easy for you to sort of wear these new way of doing things, these new behaviors? Seth, can you comment on that a little bit in your testimony?
Yeah. So my behaviors were all learned. And so a lot of them, it took me a long time to believe in the notion that I could change behaviors. I had always assumed that, that's just who I was. Seeing my parents or my siblings, some of the behaviors they have that, they're about a few years older than me, and my parents obviously much, but I thought, no, there's no way I could change these. So when I first started implementing, it was difficult, and they are, but habits are meant to be broken. I had developed 40 plus years of bad habits and learned behaviors that are not just going to be changed overnight. You hear things that people say, well, you can change, behavior in 20 some days. Okay. Some that are entrenched for 40 years are going to take years. And the perseverance aspect, you got to keep working at it and believing in it. But the biggest benefit I had is that when we would meet and talk, I'd say, okay, this is what I'm doing, all this stuff. You were very quick to make sure that I wasn't condemning myself or judging myself in how I was changing those. Sometimes I would come to you and go, this isn't working like this. This doesn't make sense. I'm doing this. And you go, well, you've got years of this. You got to work. You would always say, I don't like the way you're talking to yourself. And I would always have to stop and go, you're right, because of that internal battle. So many of these things I had believed, what did I learn? What did I believe about myself at the time that these things went on? You were always big about that. How did you view the world when this trauma came into your life? How did you view that? And I had to go back to and go, wait a minute, that was in the past. That doesn't mean that I have to live in it in the present. And so I had to change my lenses. My lenses had been foggy, dirty, different colors for years. And so once I started implementing these new behaviors, it took a while, and they still do take a while, but you have to keep working on it. And the belief comes in time. Like sometimes, some people, they might be able to turn it on and off, or might be a little bit quicker to it. I still think, well, they're really not wanting to to go through the full process. Cause I see that a lot, people just don't want to work at changing behaviors. If it's not instantaneous, and I did the same thing. If it's not instantaneous, then it's not going to work. Well, anything worthwhile is going to take time. And so mine have taken over 2 years, 3 years for that matter, to implement and start working. But it's amazing now how I can look at things and go, wow, my old self would have responded much differently. My new self will, let me just slow down and process this, because this may be similar, or this situation might be similar to how it was in the past. It doesn't mean I have to react the same way as I used to. I can look at it differently. And it's so much healthier too, because I notice, my heart level will start to go up a little bit, and then I can go, no. I'm perceiving this an old way. Let's implement the new way. And when it does, I instantly can control how my heart, how my body responds to it. My thinking is much more clear, a lot more cogent in it. And so it takes time, but you have to put the work in. Did
you find we use the word a lot, containment, containing those thoughts and evaluating those justified and unjustified feelings. So do you want to make any comments on sort of how that containment process was, like how you walked through that, and even though you felt a discomfort at times, why did you persevere of continuing to try to contain these thoughts and these feelings that were sort of using these physiological responses sometimes?
Sure. Well, when I look back, my parents didn't have, they didn't know about this stuff, they've got their own issues and things, but they didn't know anything about containment or this type of things, because they had learned it from their parents and these type of things. So, anxious people, you guys know very well, they don't know how to contain early on, because their backgrounds didn't promote healthy ways of thinking. And situations that came up, they just didn't promote those things. So I didn't learn that early on. Containment is going to be a lifelong process. Now that I understand what it is, I'll be doing this the rest of my life, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm actually glad that I know how to contain situations and these things. But containment early on was hard, because the book that you would talk to me about, that I read, that The Body Keeps a Score. Okay. When you're containing, you're developing new behaviors, your body's not used to it, and it wants to reject those things, because it's a new habit. It's used to the old habit of overreacting, getting all flustered, having the heart rate, everything go sky high. When you start to contain and do things differently, your body's rejecting that. Your mind's rejecting, your emotions are rejecting that. And so for the longest time, probably a good 6 months, once I started developing these, it took a good 6 months for my body to go, okay, this is different, but this is new. This is good. I kind of like this. And then after, some more time that went on, I had my setbacks. I mean, with anything, I had good days. I had bad weeks, bad months. I would often have the case of the bumps is what I used to call it. I had bumpy patches where it was dark all the time. But then you get that glimmer of hope when something comes up, and then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, boy, I handled that quite well. And that was another thing, Vince, that you were big on, was making sure that you, the little successes, you praise yourself on those little successes, because, they may be little, but you're adding, like what you said, another tool into your tool belt for a lifelong way of dealing with anxiety. And containment is something that I know I'm going to be doing the rest of my life, but I'm great with it. I'm glad, because had I known this, when I was a kid, it'd be a different story. But, a lot of people, I don't know if they'll say they're glad they went through this. I'm glad that I did go through it. I'm glad that God allowed me to go through this, that he didn't just automatically answer my prayer and say, no, I'm going to take this away from you right now. He's allowed me to go through this, and it's made me more Christ-like. It's made me understand that the past does not have to dictate my future. And that means behaviors are not lifelong. You can develop healthy behaviors and maintain those behaviors for the rest of your life. And those are the ones that can be, that are the ones that we really should be focusing on, is maintaining that healthy way of learning to live with adversity. And I had so much of it growing up, so much adversity that I just was tired of it. But now I look forward to adversity as like, no, I can deal with this. This is good. What is God trying to teach me in the midst of all this adversity? And it's just, we live in a fallen, broken world, and we're human beings. We are sinful. And I have to understand that people are not going to see things the way that I see. But it's not a challenge. It's actually, I welcome it now. Whereas in the past, I would shy away. I would do whatever I had to avoid, those feelings or avoid that emotion of it all. But now I actually welcome it.
You feel that, where are you sort of in your stage of recovery right now after working with me since January of 2021?
I'm probably, I've only got about one symptom left, but that's starting to dissipate quickly. The mornings, we've talked about that, where the mornings are always a little bit rougher, because it's just, as long as the body's stimulated, it's going to misbehave. It's as simple as that. And so, we're down in Southwest Florida right now for vacation. So I had to drive 20 plus hours, and then we're having some issues here at the house. Like this morning, just trying to get things situated for our meeting today. The air conditioning unit went out. So the temperature has been hot in the house, needless to say. So the AC guy was an hour and a half late coming out to fix the unit. He had to turn the breaker off, which shut down the Wi-Fi. So all these things started happening literally 30 minutes before we met. And I said, I've got a choice here. Am I going to overreact as I would in the past and blame everyone else? Or I'm going to pray about this and know that this is going to work out, and I'm going to take it for what I can. And I did that route, and all of a sudden things just started happening left and right, for this to come through. So I say that because, the mornings are still, I've got maybe about a 20-minute window where, the cortisol is still present. But once I get to walking and getting it extinguished, getting it kind of out of my system, everything begins to just smooth out for the rest of the day. So probably the morning. So I'm probably about 95 to 98% right now. And that's fine, because compared to where I was a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 for that matter, I'm very content where I'm at now. But I know that it's just the body beginning to settle back down and go back to homeostasis. And it takes time. That's the other thing too, is that I want to make sure everyone understands that biologically, when you're hyperstimulated the level that I was, it's going to take a long time. I still do my deep relaxation 2-3 times a day, where I get in a good 30 to 45 minutes. My kids and my wife know about it, so they know, okay, Dad's going to relax. I'm glad my kids are seeing this, because now they're developing those behaviors as well too, because they see, okay, if something's stressful, let's go ahead and stay calm and relaxed about it. If I need to go to my room to unwind, I can do that. So everything is having this ripple effect, like you always talked about. One of the metaphors you always use is standing in a river or a lake, and these boxes, right, would always come through, and they were always right, your underlying factors. Well, I can successfully say now I'm standing in that lake now, and there aren't any boxes approaching me. I'm actually enjoying the water, enjoying my surroundings with a smile on my face. There aren't any boxes that are approaching me. And so that's just a testimony to the website, to your therapy, and just being, persevering through the biological aspects of this.
Well, and we talked about sort of in that river analogy of sort of these boxes that are coming down, these worry boxes, these core fear boxes. Do you have a better understanding now of those core fears and how to sort of approach those core fears? And is there any evidence around those core fears? What have you learned from that, Seth?
Well, the core fears, Jim, I think you had said this on one of your Skype calls. So if I misquoted, I'm sorry. It's not our circumstances that happen to us at a young age that change us. It's our perception and how we view the world because of that circumstance, whatever that event that happens. It's how we perceived what happened to us in that event. So many of mine growing up, so many core fears of mine developed through a lot of these traumatic issues. And I viewed myself as a problem. I viewed the world as dangerous or scary. I can't trust. These type of things all developed. But when I look at them now, I can look at them as just events that happened to me to make me a better person. I don't look at them now as going, oh, I can't ever talk or think about that. It's too traumatic. It's too emotionally upsetting. I look at them now knowing that I developed that fear and that I had done it myself. I developed those fears. Those are learned fears. Nobody told me, hey, Seth, you have to be afraid of this. You have to be afraid of that. I learned those through those events because I didn't know what else to think. I was a vulnerable kid, like you always said. I was a vulnerable kid, and these things happened to me, but that doesn't mean that, I have to stay that way the rest of my life. So once we started looking at these core fears, the rejection, the abandonment, the hurt, the pain, just how the physical parts that we talked about, like the abuse I had growing up. Once you informed me that those things happened, that doesn't mean that they're happening now. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen anymore, that you're a different person now. The core fears began to literally fade away. They started to just dissolve. And because I was looking at it different, that emotional part, like, through the cognitive, the CBT that you gave me, Vince. Once I learned all that cognitive part, that limbic lag that it goes on, needed time to just repair. It's that little boy in me that needed to be repaired. And it took time. The emotional part took time. And I had to go after those core fears. There was just no other way around it. I had to attack those things and understand what was stemming the apprehension, what was causing all these symptoms that come about, and that I was literally, almost instigating, those type of symptoms through my perception of things, and how they went on now. But had I not gone after those core fears, had you not went after them, because you did, you went after them. I mean, you brought all the gardening tools out and went after them in me. And had I not done that, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. There's no way.
Wow. It's pretty amazing, your journey, Seth. If you could give the viewers today sort of a list of do's and don'ts of this pathway of anxiety recovery, what would you tell viewers today? What to do and what not to do, sort of.
Okay, sure. What not to do, I would say, is to run away, thinking that your body's not misbehaving because of stress. Stress is, what is it? 90% of the diseases that we have today are caused by stress.
Psychosomatic disorders.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so you can't run away from what your body's doing. So many people want to, self-medicate, do these type of things. There's a time and place for medication. I'm not going to make that in light of that whatsoever. But you can't run away from what your body's doing. You've got to pay attention to your body and know that you hit that stress threshold and that your body needs to, it's informing you. It's telling you, look, you are way stressed out. You've got to calm some things down. And the biggest one is being your anxious behavior. Your anxious behavior is stressing your body out. So the don't for me is don't run away from that. Go after these things, as painful as they are. So many people have trauma in their life. So many of these people have these issues. You've got to go after them. If you want to be healthy and put yourself on that road to success, you've got to get healthy by identifying what these things are. So don't run away from them. A do is to 100% go through this website, get one of these therapists through the Anxiety Center. I mean, Vince, I hope everybody understands it right now. You want to get to the core of these things, you have to get with Vince or one of these therapists. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Forget the financial aspect. You have no choice. Like, the money will be there. You can remedy that. God will figure that out for you. If you truly want to get better and change your behaviors, you have to get the right therapist. And the right therapists are through the Anxiety Center, period. I mean, Vince, I'm telling you, there will be people here in Florida and Indiana and everywhere I go that if they ever ask about this, I'll say, Vince was the guy that got me through it. God used him to get me through this. And so you've got to do that. That is the big, find the therapist through this website, connect with them, and do the work. And if you put the work in and you believe, that's the other thing too, is that people have to believe. It's going to take time. It's not going to be an overnight solution. If you want an easy fix, you're going to be spinning your own wheels and just creating another behavior that is going to backfire against you. So you got to put the time in and be willing to tackle these issues and do the work.
Jim, do you want to make any comments or any questions for Seth this morning?
Well, I really love what you're talking about, and I want to continue a little bit if you have a bit more time. Sure. What I want to do is I want to end our session, so I saved the recording that we have so far. I'm going to send you another link, and then we can rejoin if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, I'll send it ASAP, so just watch your email, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for allowing me to take that break. I'm going to have to set up a few appointments with Vince because I have a bit of post-traumatic stress about saving these recordings. I'll tell you why. I had a great interview with another person who recovered. Fabulous. We talked for about an hour and a half. He gave such great information. He was so encouraging. And then when I shut the session down, it said it was saved. Went back to open it up, corrupted. It's like, what? Of course it was gone. And so I learned to, putting my old programmer's hat back on, save often. So anyways, I appreciate you being willing to take a break and resume. It took me a little while to get the link back out because the recording took a while to save, but here we're good to go again.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Not a problem at all. So I'm glad I can help.
Really, really love the things you're saying. And I think it's really going to resonate with a lot of people. One of the things Vince and I were talking about is the importance of getting therapy for anxiety so you can work through, the issues that really keep driving it. It's one thing to get rid of symptoms, and I love your analogy, and if you don't mind, I'm going to borrow the weed analogy where,
Sure.
It's going to keep coming back if you don't get that root out. And this is where the therapy really pays dividends. Well, you can get your stress down, getting root out solves the problem. So it's a great comment you made there. In terms of my questions I would love to hear, the involvement that God had in your recovery and so on and so forth. Because, one of the things we see is people who are close to God, we just see God moving in their lives to lead them in the direction to do the work and help them to do the work to recover. We see a difference between people who are godly and who are listening to the Holy Spirit and those who don't. And so I just wanted to hear your story about how you watched the Holy Spirit move you in the direction, bring things up that you needed to address and so on and so forth.
Sure. Well, I'm glad this was this is what I was looking forward to the most, just because my faith has become so much stronger through this. When this all started going, 2020, I was strong, but I was often too many times weak, areas of my life. And so when this went on, God brought this into my life to solidify my faith and and trust in him. I don't think I was trusting him as much as I had said that I was doing. I think I talked a good game that I was trusting him in all things and knew that he was sovereign and allowed things to come into my life, but I don't know if I was really believing that. And so when he brought this into my life, I had to go right to him and say, okay, you've allowed this to take place. You read Job, you read the book of Habakkuk, when they were just always constantly going, why? And it's amazing when you stop asking why and you realize that you can just trust God, that he actually gives you the answer. It may not be the answer you want, but you get the bigger picture in all of it. And so my faith has grown exponentially. I have completely surrendered the control and everything into his hands, and knowing that he's worked all these things out for my good, but it's all for his glory. And that's the main thing, is what I wanted to emphasize the most, is that I'm glad I went through this because it brings him more glory. And that's all. I mean, I exist to glorify him. It's as simple as that. And I hope people understand that, sometimes even those who believe, you'll go to people and they'll say, well, you're lacking, you don't believe them enough. And once you start believing them, it'll go away. And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like, when you read the Old Testament, you read these stories, even with Paul, he brought these things into people's lives for a bigger reason. And it's always that refining process, making them more Christ-like and having them surrender completely to his sovereignty and providential love and wisdom. And that's just it. He knows what he's doing. If people would just trust him and surrender that. And see, that was my big sin in my life, was worry and the lack of control, of trust were my big sins that I had to repent of, Jim, and surrender those to him. And that was vital in my recovery. And I want to make sure that that is known, is that they were vital in that.
Well, yeah, that's so powerful, because that's so true. I mean, when you think of anxiety is all about worry, isn't it? Imagine worst case scenarios and then believing they're going to happen, and then away we go. And so, God can remove all of that worry just by trusting him, knowing what he's doing is good for us. And I agree with you too. One of the things that I like about being a Christian, that God is more interested in our character development than he is in our happiness. But as we develop a character, the happiness comes along. So he knows the chain of events. So that's awesome. Wow. Yeah.
Correct.
Wow. I love what you said, and I hope it resonates with the viewers, the importance of getting therapy. So many people try to do this on their own, and they spend years trying to do it on their own, and only to get to the same place or worse down the road. Getting therapy sooner than later is the best thing we can do. And so, is there any other things you wanted to leave with the viewers? Some of the things you learned over the course of time, or something, if you want to say, speak, directly to someone who might be struggling and been struggling for a long time? Anything you want to say to them? Sure.
At some point, if someone's out there that's like me, you have to realize that this is totally doable if you invest and you believe in. The great thing about this program is that everyone from you and the therapist have all suffered what we've gone through. And if people would understand that and go, they've been where you're at, they know what you're going through, and that there is hope and belief that you too can recover and get over this and live a better quality of life than you had previously done. That's the biggest thing I cannot drive home. It's like, look, they know what they're talking about. There is a commitment, but if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And that means your spiritual, your physical, your emotional. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. I don't care if you have all the money in the world or whatever you have. It's not going to bring you happiness. And for me, I couldn't anymore just live with the uncertainty and just this constantly trying to figure it out. This like Rubik's Cube, I just kept wrestling over in my head for all of these years. Enough was enough. And that's where I kept emphasizing God broke me of that. And the pieces had to go where they were, and they had to be rebuilt. And the quality of the therapy is unmatched in the entire world. I'll say that right now. I wish there was like a bumper sticker or something, I could put on my car and advertise for you guys. I made a commitment. It was very similar to yours, Jim, is that when I started talking to Vince, I said, okay, Lord, you get me through this, and I will do everything I can the rest of my life to help those who have a similar issue, or anything I can do to help them. Use me in that means. And, I've been a teacher, and I teach psychology. I teach a whole litany of classes, and God has brought those individuals into my life. He has held up his end of the bargain, and I'm holding up mine, and I will take it to my grave. And I mean, I am that committed to it, because he has been faithful to me. I have to be faithful back. And the therapy is
losing you there. Sorry, Seth. Looks like the connection's a bit disrupted there.
It's okay. The therapy is just unmatched, Jim. People have to invest in it. It's as simple as that, and they will see the fruits of that, with time. Again, people go to a therapist and they go, okay, what can you give me, either verbally or medicinally, for this to go all the way? And it's like, well, they're going to give you verbally things, but it's going to take time. Just like anything in life, for that matter. I mean, it takes time. Acting with Vince and going through, and that's the other thing too, is how you laid everything out on your website. Everything is laid out so that way you follow everything, and you begin to unwrap what's going on with your body physically, what's going on mentally, what's going on emotionally. The pieces just begin to fall into place. And then, so your level 1 recovery begins to take shape. Okay. You start to feel better. All this stuff. Then you get to level 2, and the level 1 will kick up a little bit, just because you're getting to the core of those issues emotionally. But then all of a sudden it begins to just sink together, and it meshes, and then the belief and the confidence take over. And once you're at that level, you realize, okay, I am 100% glad I went through this.
Yeah. As awful as anxiety can be, there is great benefit coming out the other side, because for me, it revolutionized my life. And I would never be where I am today in terms of happiness and certainly my connection with God had I not gone through that turmoil. So, I love the commitment you made too. As tomorrow I'm turning 70, and I'm talking to God, typically people are retired at this time, but I made my lifetime commitment. So I'm going to be here till you take me home. So
absolutely.
Hope you do the same.
Well, look at it like that. I mean, had you not gone through those 12 years, what would that have done for Vince? What would that have done for me? Right? We wouldn't have these testimonies. We wouldn't be where we're at now. And so God used that in your life to create this. And it's just amazing how he takes all this adversity and works it out for his good and glory through all of it. I mean, that's what I tell my wife all the time. It's like, this is just absolutely amazing that he does this, and he does it so even understand. Because even if he showed it to us, we still wouldn't believe it. And that's the most thing. So that, I am sorry that you went through it, but I am glad that you went for me.
Sorry, you're cutting out. Your feed is dropping there, but I heard the gist of that, and you're more than welcome. I think Vince feels the same way. That we are blessed to be able to let God use us in the way that He does to reach out to people, those who are hurting and lost, especially in these dark days. Where so many people are struggling with mental health things. And God is reaching out to each and every one of those, saying, there's a way through this that you don't have to suffer. And we're just glad to be a part of that. So,
absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for taking the time to have this conversation, Seth. It's just been fabulous. So many good things you've said, and I know it's going to be an encouragement to a lot of people who are struggling. And Vince, before we break, is there anything you wanted to say to the viewers who are watching or to Seth?
Well, I just want to say that, Seth, I might have said this in the beginning, but you put the work into it. There's this whole element of faith and then the whole element of hope. And we all need, every person on this planet needs something to cling to hope. And like myself, 20 plus years of anxiety and lots of underlying factors. And for yourself to through what you knowing that you cling to hope, you cling to faith, and you now have a deeper understanding of what the body is, and anxiety is not even dangerous. That we.
It looks like we are having connection problems, Vince, too.
Oh, are we?
Yeah, starting to drop out. I'm not sure if that's happening with Zoom, but I didn't get the last part of what you just said.
Just, that element of that, that we get caught so much. And I think we walked through this together, Seth. We got caught, just the understanding of the perception of fear and threat, and how for a long time, and we kind of tore that apart, if you want to use that analogy, and we ripped it apart and we shredded it, and because we really got at the.
Oh, I lost you. Vince, are you there?